Okay, what I wanted to go over today is how to create a dirt shader using ambient occlusion for Arnold. So in my original tutorial, I was using Mental Ray, and so now I'm switching to Arnold. And so the procedure is a little bit different in Arnold than it was in Mental Ray, so I wanted to cover that. Okay, so just a couple of aspects that people need to understand that I think people get confused about, which is you can use a max map into an Arnold map into a shader, but you cannot use an Arnold map into a max map. For example, okay, so here's a physical material, and these are my max maps. Okay, so something like cellular. All right, then I can go down here to my Arnold maps, and let's see, I could get something like mix RGBA, which is mixing two colors together. And so let's put like a pink in the top one and a blue in the bottom one. And I'll put this on our object. And we'll put cellular in here for my base color. And we'll just do a quick render. And that pattern's really big on there. So let's go ahead and make this much smaller. Now you can see your pattern on there. And so now let's use it into this Arnold shader. So we got an Arnold map, which is these two colors together, mixing it with this. And it works just fine. Okay. So this is a max node going into an Arnold node, which is just fine. Okay. So, but let's go up and get a max node. Okay. Here's a max mix, which is like this mix RGB. This is maxes. So we'll do the same thing in here. We'll put pink in here and blue in here. And then I'm going to go down and get a noise map from Arnold. Let's plug that in and see how big that is. Okay, let's adjust that color, that size a little bit. So we'll say maybe 3 here. Okay, so there we go. All right, so this is an Arnold node, and we're going to plug it into our max node, and then plug that into our base color, and you'll see it doesn't work. Okay, so the moral to the story is that you cannot run an Arnold node through a max node, but you can run a max node through an Arnold node. Okay, so that confuses people a lot, okay? And so people ask me all the time, well, when you look at a node, can you tell if it's an Arnold node or if it's a max node, okay? And the answer is you can't. You just have to know, okay? Now, so there's a lot of times I use a lot of max nodes going into Arnold, okay? But for this particular exercise, what I'm going to have you do is to go under your render setup, and I'm going to have you turn off your legacy support. Okay. Then it's going to turn off all the ones that would cause us a problem, so you won't even see them. Okay, so we're just going to start off with a base shader on this. Okay, I'm going to go to my advanced node mode, and I'm going to turn off reflections, and I'm going to turn my roughness up, and that way we're not going to get any reflections on our object as we're doing it. And I'm going to also do region renders to kind of speed up our workflow here. So we'll speed this up. Okay. All right, so what we're going to be doing is using a pretty much pure Arnold workflow to get our ambient occlusion in. So there's certain maps that we're going to be using. Okay, we're going to use this color correct node, so we're going to bring that out. And let's see, we're going to need our mixed RGBA. We're going to need a multiply. And let's see, what else do we need? We need a ambient occlusion. And I think the last one I need is a ramp RGB. Okay, so these are the nodes that I'm going to use to create our flow. Okay, so right off the bat, we're just using this mix RGB just as an experiment to make our things go faster. Later, we'll dump this. We don't really need this. But for what we're doing right now, this will make our life easier. So I'm just going to put that in our base color. So right off the bat, if I come in with my ambient occlusion and I put that in the mix, then when I render, there you go. I'm going to get my dirt in there. Okay. Now, the thing I want to do is to come up with a way that's easy to control the amount of dirt that's in there. Okay. That's what we're going to play with. So, there's several ways to do this, and I'm just going to show you some different ways. Okay. Now, a real easy way, one of the things is a lot of times the ambient's not dark enough and we need to amplify it. So there's a multiply node, which allows you to put two images together and multiply them. So if I just put these on top of themselves and put that in, so I'm loading the same ambient occlusion right back over the top, okay, then it's going to darken it because it's just laying right back on top of it, okay? So that's one way to do it, okay? There's not a lot of control in that, but it is one way to do it, okay? So I'm going to set that one aside for a minute. Another one is this color correction node, okay? I'm going to go ahead and put our ambient occlusion in our input and then put that in. And now when we render, we're going to have some controls of this, okay? Now, what's nice about this is we control it through our gamma, okay? So as you lower the gamma, it's going to darken it. So this is a 1. If I go 0.5 and now render, it's going to darken it, okay? I can darken it further. Go say 0.2 and get it really dark, okay? Now you can risk a danger in here where you can go too low and you can get some trash in it. Okay, let's try 0.05. Well, it's not giving me much trash, but you can get some trash in it. And of course, the other thing is if it's too dark, if we go into the minus, okay, so minus 1.5, okay, then that's going to make it much lighter. Matter of fact, we can hardly see it there. Just don't go that far. Let's go maybe minus 1.2. So it's slightly in there. Okay, so that's one way. That's a pretty good way. So we're getting a similar thing as to this, but now I'm able to have a dial that I can kind of control it. So that's a very good way to do it too. But I have a third way. Okay. And that one, I'm going to use an RGB ramp. So we plug this in and then we go into our mix. Okay. Now to do this one, what you want to do is right up here on your type, we want to change this to custom. And then this is a Bezier kind of curve, and we really want it linear. So down here where this says interpolation, we want to make this linear. And by the way, there's a little button right here that you can click on, which will bring out a bigger graphic of this. And so what we're going to do is adjust this curve. So I'm going to put a point on this right here. Okay. Now for this, these values need to be black. So they all need to be 0, 0, 0. This is RGB. Okay. And then as I drag this across, this is a gradient. Okay. So I'm controlling how much black is in it for my mask. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to click in here and put a button. And then for these all need to be 1s. So it's white. And so then I can control how much I'm using with a curve. Okay. So let's start off somewhere, say maybe there. And so we're running our ambient occlusion through this curve, and let's see what we get. Okay, so now I'm getting some controls in here, and so I can control how hard or soft the fall off is. Okay, and then I can also, how much I want in there. So this is a similar flexibility as dialing in a number, but the difference in the number, I couldn't control how far this fall off was. And so by using the ramp, I can control how far this is coming out. Okay. So for me, this is the best workflow. Okay. So I'm going from my ambient occlusion to my ramp. Okay. Now, I'm going to initially just go directly in with my ambient occlusion, and I have some controls with it too. And so what I'm trying to do is to get it in a good medium place. So in this fall off right here, this is how far it is falling off when we have it coming out. And you can see as I went from 0 to 1, I've tightened this up. So I think a good place to start on it is a 0.5. And that gives me a good place to start. So I'm kind of controlling my fall off a little bit here, and I can control a lot here, but I find that this curve gives me a little bit more control of what I'm trying to do in here. Okay. So once I start this off, now I can come in here. Of course, you don't have to open this window. You can do it here too. And now I'm controlling, how much I want in there. And then I'm controlling how much it's falling off. Okay. All right. So that's a good place to start. To start getting our dirt in here. Okay. So I'm going to label this one. Okay. This is going to be my dirt, and I'm going to call this crevice. So these are the dirt that's going to be in our little crevices. And so I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to place it on this one. And this is dirt crevice amount. Okay. So now another thing I'm going to want to do is to put a little bit of a grunge in there. Okay. And to do that, I'm going to go in here and get a noise. Okay. Now this is a Arnold noise. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put this multiply node in here. What this allows me to do is if I plug it in here and then I run it through, I've not done anything. I haven't changed anything. Okay. But now what I can do is I can copy this ramp node. Okay. So if I just hold down my shift key and pull it down, then I can run this through my noise. But before I do that, I want to adjust the size of my noise. So I'm just putting the noise on it by itself. Oops, I want to plug it here. And that'll show me my noise on there. And I want to do that first to get my noise down to a size that's appropriate. I don't know, let's go 5. Look at that. So what I'm trying to do is get some clumping that I'm going to get into our area. And so that size works pretty good. Now, one of the things you need to make sure is that you're sizing everything appropriately, because procedurals are based on scale. Okay. And a lot of times people screw this whole thing up because they don't get the scale correctly. So under your unit setup, okay, you want to make sure that you're set up for centimeters. And then we're using feet with decimal inches. If you always use it that way, then once we create this procedural, we can save this into a material library and we can use it over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to, with this noise, I'm going to take this ramp and I'm going to put it into my color 1, and it's going to control this grunge going into those areas. So the nice thing about this is that this is the node that takes a lot to calculate, which is this one. And I'm only using one. So I'm not using a different one for here and a different one for there. Now, if I didn't have this ramp in here, then I would have to have 2 different nodes because I'd be controlling the amount with this. So what I've done is put this at a good neutral point, and then I can use these RGB ramps to decide how much of each one is on there. Okay. So, actually we need to tell this one, this is dirt /grunge crevice. Okay. And so I'm copying the text off of this one and I'm going to paste it onto this one. And this is my grunge. I'm calling the grunge the little lumpy stuff that's in there. Amount. Okay. And then what I'm going to do to merge these together is this is going to go into this multiply. So basically my dirt and my grunge are going to be layered on top of each other and plugged in. Okay. So let's go ahead and this one is so this is grunge. This is grunge. Pattern. This is my grunge pattern. Okay, and the other thing that's nice about this multiply right now is I can uncheck these. So right now I just want to work on the amount of grunge that's in it. Okay. So I can just uncheck here and then all it's going to render is the grunge that's in there. Okay. So now I can start going into this ramp here for my grunge and I can decide how much I want, how far it falls out, so I can get the grunge just right into those areas. Like that. And then, of course, if I turn this one on, then that's just going to give me my dirt. Okay, and that dirt's pretty heavy. So we're going to come into here and we're going to back the dirt back down. Okay. And I want a little bit floating a little bit further out. Maybe a little less. Okay, maybe something like that. And now I can turn both of these on and can see them both together. And now I've got some lumps in there. Okay, so I'm able to flow these together. Okay, so this node is my dirt, grunge, crevice blend. If I can spell. Okay, so the last thing I want to do now is I want to be able to control how much of this is being used as a total. And that's where this color correction node comes in. So now I can put this color correction node in there. And this gamma will allow me to dial in how much I want. Okay, so that's right now the gamma set at 1. It's not doing anything. Okay, if I start lowering this, then that's going to darken it up. And then if I make it higher, it's going to start crunching it. Okay, so 1.2. Let's go 1.6. And I can just keep lightening it up. So this is crevice amount. Okay, so there is my controls for my grunge and dirt. So we're only using one ambient occlusion node. As a matter of fact, I can turn these samples down to 2. It's going to make it a little more grainy, but as far as dirt is concerned, I'm okay that it's a little more grainy, and it'll calculate faster because there's less samples. This is a quality setting. I can't really go down to 1. That's going to really make it really kind of grainy and falling apart. So we really need at least 2 samples. And, when I'm baking it out, when I'm baking this to a map, I might want to use 3 samples. Okay. It'll take a little bit longer to render, but I'm baking it to a map, so then it would be okay. So there's your basic grunge that's going to be in our crevices. Okay. But now we need some grunge that's going to be on the top. Okay, so to do that, I just want to copy all of these nodes. Okay, so I'm just picking them all, hold down my shift key and drag them down. Now, unfortunately, it loses all its naming conventions. So first thing I want to rename all this. So what I have a tendency to do is just come in here and copy and put the same thing back on them first. So I just copy all these same names and put it on the exact same node. Matter of fact, I noticed this one. This is grunge crevice pattern. So these are calling all the crevices, or the innies, so to speak. Okay, so now I come back to this and I'm going to rename it. This is going to be surface. So this is going to control the amount of stuff put on the top surface. So now I just have to go through these again and just replace where it says surface with crevice. Okay, and surface pattern. surface blend and surface amount. Okay, and then we're just going to unplug this one. That one's done. And then let's work with this one. Okay, so right now it's the exact same settings, so we're going to get the same thing. But what I'm going to do is go over to my ambient, and the magic button is right here, invert the normals. Okay, so what that's going to do now is it's going to take and put everything, instead of down in these crevices, is going to put them up here on the top. Now, a lot of times you have to go in and adjust this because the fall off a lot of times is putting maybe more dirt than you want in here. And maybe you want more grunge. So the easiest thing to do is right here, let's just turn off the dirt. So the only thing that's going up here is the grunge. And I may decide, oh, I want a little more grunge in here. So all I have to do is to go into my ramp here. And then if I drag this over some, that's adding more grunge into it. Okay. And so maybe I'm going to go right about here, bring this back so it doesn't go as far. And then I'm getting some kind of grungy in there. Okay. So now I can double check. Let's go into my mix here. Let's turn this one on and this one off. So now it's giving me my dirt, and that's probably maybe going out a little bit far. So I go to this ramp. In fact, those should be setting like that. And pull it back a little bit, and then it won't drift out quite as far. Maybe that was too much. Maybe something like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. And now I can go back into my multiply, turn them both on. Okay. And now there is my top surface. So this is my surface nodes. These are my crevice nodes. Okay. And now to put those together, I just need to get a multiply node. So we'll go back in here and get a multiply. And that will put them both together. So that looks pretty good. And then the last thing I want to do is to, okay, we'll come in here, and now we don't need this anymore. This was just for test purposes. So now I'm ready to create my shaders that I'm going to put on this. So what I'm going to do is come up here and get a blend shader. Okay. Then by default, the blend shader, this is going to make these as standard. So we just right click, change the material. And we're going to change these to physical. So we're going to do that to both of these. Just change them to physical materials. Okay, the top one is going to be our dirt grunge shader. Okay, now I find a really good default for this is this rough concrete is a good place to start. Now, I don't need any of these nodes. I'm just looking for the way the shader is set up, and that makes a nice kind of matte kind of shader for the dirt. Then I just need to dial in kind of a dirt color. Don't get it too saturated. Need it pretty dark, something like that. And then for this one, which is going to be my paint, a good starting point is satin. Always defaults to purple, not sure why. And then I'm going to go in here, and you can do whatever color you want to do. But the thing about it is I want it low chroma. I don't want it too bright. Okay. Don't get color your paint too bright. Okay. So then this is my dirt grunge paint node. Okay, and I'm going to apply that. And so now, oops, what do we got here? Oh, I didn't put the mask in. That would help. Drop your mask in there. Okay, there we go. And now we've got paint on our surface and we've got dirt on our surface. Okay, I'm going to pause this and render this a little bit bigger so it's easy to see. Okay, so there it is rendered out. My dirt pass. Now, one thing that you might notice back here is it's got a lot of dirt in some areas back here. Now, I could go in and adjust the shader to get that out, but I'll have a tendency when I get those kind of dark spots to just paint them out in Photoshop. So what we're going to do is bake this into a map. Okay. So the nice thing about this shader is then you can save, at least you can save this whole thing, but if you save this node, then once you have this built, you can put it into your material library, and then it's easy to bring it out every time to drop on something. And so it's all ready to go. As long as you built your stuff to scale, this piece is about, I think it was about a foot long. So yeah, it was about a foot long. So this piece was about a foot long. So that's about correct scale. And so all of this is the correct scale. And of course, you can always adjust it for scale up and down some too. But if you build it correct scale, then you can use this over and over and over again, really quickly pull it in and then have a dirt map on your stuff. Okay. All right. Now, the next part I'm going to go into is how to bake this. Bake it into a bitmap. It's pretty easy to do. What we're going to do is to come up and we're going to get an Arnold map to material shader. Okay. This pink one. Okay. All I have to do is plug this into it and then apply this to my piece, and it will render out a black and white map. Okay. So it's going to render out a black and white pass. And then I can render that to a texture. So I just go render to texture, which is 0 on your keyboard. Now, if you get an error message right here, okay, so a lot of times, according to what version of Arnold that you have, you may get an error right here where it says Arnold doesn't support render to texture. Older versions of Arnold don't support render to texture. So it's according to what version you have. I've got the current version. To check your version, if you go up here to Arnold and you pull down to help and you go about this, well, this is the Arnold version I have is 5.4, but the main thing you want to look at is this product version, 3.2.53. Okay, so if I go over to Arnold's website, okay, you can download the newest version. Okay, it's free to download it. Okay, and of course you get, we're not Maya, we're Macs, and we're using I'm using Windows 2018. Okay, so you just have to click on that. Then it's going to give you, that you accept, their terms, and then you download it. And then once you've downloaded it, save it, download it, then you have to shut Macs down, and then you run it, and it'll update Arnold to the current version. Okay. Now you can go over here when you're on this first screen and click on release notes right here, and it'll show you all the versions. Okay. So you may have some version in here that's 1.2926 or, whatever. I'm not really sure where in here, which one of these versions is when they started, where they fixed Arnold to be able to render to texture. I just downloaded the newest version. Okay, that's what I did. Download the newest version, and that way you're updated, and it will support render to texture. Okay, so if you're getting an error message when you come in here, that's because you need to update Arnold, and it's a free update. Okay, so how to do it in here is you just pick your object, so it'll show up in here. Okay. And then I suggest increasing your padding. The default is 2. I would say maybe 10. That's just how many pixels outside of our piece it's going to render, so we have some padding in there. Now, by default, it usually defaults to automatically unwrap your model, and we don't want to unwrap it because we've already unwrapped it, okay? So you say use your existing channel, and mine wraps on channel 1, so this has already been unwrapped. Okay, then we try to tell it what we want to render out, okay? So you just click this add button, and then you want a complete map, okay? Not a diffuse map, but a complete map, okay? Which will calculate your ambient occlusion into it. So you add that in there. Now, by default, it's a real small map size, 256. I'm going to go ahead and render out a 2048, okay? And then we do not want shadows on here, okay? So in other words, mine's just floating out here. It wouldn't make any difference. But if I had this sitting on a ground plane, it would put shadows underneath it. And I don't want those shadows into my AO. Okay. Then all you have to do is render it. Okay. Once that's rendered, that'll bake that in. Okay. So I go over here to Photoshop. Now, one of the things I encourage you to do is when you're rendering it, it'll default to save as a Targa file. Okay, when you're outputting here, I would change this to a PNG, and you want a PNG with an alpha channel because there's a bug in Arnold, because when we're creating a mask, running around a mask, we don't want black in the background. We want white in the background. So normally what you would do is just come in here and put white. But Arnold doesn't recognize this. So no matter what I do, when I hit render, it's going to make a black background. Okay. And I don't want that. So render it as a transparent PNG, and then the background will just be transparent. That way, when I open it in Photoshop, okay, it'll have transparent background. I can just make a new layer and fill that with white. And then that's what I want for my mask, for my dirt mask. Now, this is what I was talking about, that you get some areas that's extra grunge, but I can just paint that out. So if I just come in here and put a layer on top of it, I always put layers on top. Okay. And those little lines kind of blow people away. Sometimes they're like, what are all these lines? All that's doing, that's your padding. So all it's doing is copying the last pixel and letting it go out to give you a little bit of padding in there around your piece. So I could come in now and I could go in here and start painting, and I could paint out this parts I don't want. Okay, so we can manipulate this. Now, another thing that you want to do a lot of times is to be able to put a wireframe over the top of this so we can kind of see what it is at any given time, because this can get confusing when you have a lot of pieces in here. So in Max, in my UV unwrap, when I have it on here, so there's my unwrap, I can go to Tools, Render UV Template, and it's going to render me a template, a wireframe template of this. Now I want to make this 2048. And since we're going on top of white, by default, it's going to render just like this, which is the green line around the outside and then white on the inside. So if I go over here on my edges and I change this to black, then it's going to render it out black, which is better for what I'm doing. Okay. Because then I can open that in Photoshop. Okay. And I saved it out as a transparent PNG. So then all I have to do is right click over here, duplicate this layer, and then tell it to put on top of that my other image in here. And then there it is on top. And since I changed it to a white wire, then it's easy for me to see exactly where the edges of everything is. So I could go into these areas and lighten these up so it's not as heavy. And since I'm painting on a layer, you know, I can always come in here and change it or whatever. I'm not destroying my original map. And then I'm going to turn this off just to, no, I'm going to leave my wireframe on. I'm going to mess this up just to show you a point. So save as, and I'm going to save this as a PNG. Okay. And this, I'll just call this my, widget, dirt mask. Okay, so we're going to go back into here. And I don't need that on there anymore. And what I'm going to do is to come in here and get a bitmap. And I'm going to get that. And so now there is my flattened bitmap. So now, instead of using this AO, I can put my bitmap into here, reapply this, and then I can render. Now, see, it's got the wireframe on there. Oops, I forgot to turn the wireframe off. Okay, now this throws people off a little bit. So what we do is to go in here and then resave it. So we go back over here. Oops, forgot. Okay. So then I'm just going to save it again. And I'm just going to overwrite the other one. Okay. So we'll go back to our PNG. There it is. I'm just going to save it and overwrite it. Okay. All right, let me finish this rendering just real quick. Okay, so that finished. So I'm going to go back over here and I'm just going to reload this. Okay, so now it's not in there. And I'm going to hit render. And oh my gosh, the wireframe's still in there. What the heck? Wait a minute. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa! Whoa, wait. Whoa, this is not right. It's still rendering. Okay. Here's the thing. Arnold has its own specific image file format that it uses. Okay. So when we use a PNG or a Targa as a bitmap, the first thing it does is converts it into its own format, and then that's what it's using to render with. Well, when I re-upload the same file, it's still going to use the file that it had already saved. So what you have to do is to purge the old one that it converted to. So you go up here to Arnold, flush, and you can tell it to flush, you know, lights, textures, whatever. I'm just going to say flush all. So now it dumped that image that it made. So now when I render it, it's going to go back and look at the image again and bring it back in. And so now this is going to render probably 3 or 4 times as fast as the procedural did because it's a bitmap. And plus now I can do things like paint on the bitmap. And plus then this could go into a game engine because I've converted this into a bitmap. And so you have a lot of different flexibilities with it. Okay, so that's the workflow and there are other ways to do this also. This is not the only way to create this node, but this is a pretty nice dirt node that then you can save into your library, use it over and over again to originally get you some dirt. Then you bake it out. Okay. And then you can manipulate it in Photoshop. Okay. Hope that helped you guys out. All right. Thank you very much.